Peace, everybody. So it goes ahead and wait for people to step on. So just saying what's up in advance. Feel free to let me know where you are from so I can show you some love. We're just gonna let YouTube kind of send this signal out. So we got Baltimore. We got Baltimore up in here. So So Baltimore, how's it going? Appreciate you being hopping on. And I'm quite sure some more people come on. So let me go ahead and just start get the juices going. So peace everybody, I'm Satori Seals. And a lot of you know I do a variety of things. One of the things I do is Living Soul Numerology System. I'm a soul guider in that system. And so one of the things that we do, DMV, what's up? We got Baltimore DMVs showing up in this real strong. They always show me love anyway, so I'm feeling kind of good on that. So appreciate you. Um, so one of the things, appreciate that. Appreciate that. So one of the things we're going to do, we're going to tap into relationship numerology, and we're going to help. What I want to do is help y'all understand it in a very social, practical sense. And since Ayesha Curry and Stephen Curry is trending again in the podcast world and on social media, I was kind of asked, people were kind of curious to kind of like to get a read, get a pulse on a relationship dynamic. So in fairness, I'm not going to be getting too much into the weeds um, about them, but what I'm going to do is break down the energy that attracted them together and the energy that they operate up under. And then I'll kind of maybe touch in what we're all witnessing or we're kind of questioning about their relationship dynamic. But I'm gonna come from an energetic space and explain it from that aspect, so that way we can kind of have a concept and an understanding in regards to what we understand about them. So in the meanwhile, while everybody's hopping on, I appreciate y'all checking in. And so one thing I want to say, the Living Soul numerology system is not the traditional numerology system. Living Soul numerology system is soul based and is based on universal principles and laws, and also with the law of self, using line numbers 1 through 9, which is very similar. And so there's very unique things about it. One of the things we can do is do soul mapping. We can get understanding about people's profile and also get insight into the daily energy projections for the week and all that kind of stuff. Um, it has a wide range of scope that it covers. And tonight we're going to show uh, how does that look energetically in the relationship space. And we call that soul energy for relationship. Relationship numerology is soul energy that we call it inside the Living Soul numerology system. And so again, we're going to deal with Ayesha Curry and Steph Curry. So to chime in, they have, so some of you might be new to some of the terminology, so bear with me as I try to build a little bit so that way everybody can kind of follow me. But in essence, everybody has a soul profile number. And we have four significant numbers, and those numbers can repeat themselves. They can be triple, or it could be quadruple, or singular. And those numbers give us a lot of insight into our love styles. It gives us insight into the internal conflicts that we might have energetically. It'll give us insight to the energetic conflict that we might have with others based off of their numbers. It gives us insight about how we move in life, what our tendencies may be. It gives us insight in terms of how we might move throughout during the week energetically. It gives us insight to get a projection what the vibe's gonna be like for the year for us independently. It gives us insight what our attraction matrix is inside a relationship. It gives us insight into what our repulsion matrix is inside relationships. So, and it goes on and on and on. But you got the gist of that. This is a very universal, multi-usage type of predictive um, spiritual system for the guidance and upliftment of the soul. And so, when we're gonna tap into Ayesha and Steph Curry, their Steph Curry's numbers are 3587. Okay, and Ayesha Curry's numbers are 3598. Now, some of you are very familiar with the Living Soul Numerology system and actually are trained and certified. So if you're in the comments, go ahead and vibe with some people on certain questions that might need to be answered, stuff like that. But so that's their numbers right there. And so what I want to bring out tonight, I want to explain that when we talk about relationships, I want to encourage everyone to think about it energetically first, because energy precedes reality. And so when we begin to understand the energetic association behind how we relate, um, we begin to slowly begin to see the dynamics of relationships a lot differently. We begin to understand some things because, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, we have been engineered or encouraged to view relationships from a monolithic point of view, or we're stovepipe into certain orientation. And that's just not so. There are different love styles, there's different type of energetic combinations um, that we begin to understand. And so it's interesting, just based off of two individuals in a relationship, they can have eight different love styles at one time that's mixing inside their mix. And the question is, what does that create? What does that formulate? So, in other words, what is the overarching energy that governs them by them coming together as a love interest, people in an intentional relationship, marriage, how we want to categorize it. And so we all are bringing energy to each other. And so in that combination, it creates an overarching energy that governs or influences what y'all come together. And so that's what I'm going to speak to by Aisha and Steph Curry. Um, Also, so when we talk about energy, um, a lot of people have heard of masculine energy and feminine energy, but we also have an androgynous energy. So we refer to it as gender energy. So you have masculine energy, androgynous energy, and feminine energy. And then these energies, a lot of times we talk about relationships, soon we say masculine, we're automatically thinking dominance. And that is not fully true. The thing is, each energy, gender energy, can take a different type of position. Okay. And so the masculine can take on a dominant position. The masculine also can take on a neutral position. It also can take on a submissive position. Yes. Does this kind of spiritual energy correspond with it? Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're talking about the, rhythm, polarity. We can apply thermodynamics. We talk about the law of gravity, and actually it's all entwined in this. Absolutely. Um, and so you got the masculine takes on those different positions. Now, interesting. And y'all go ahead and show some love and share this so that way you too can give some energy behind this in the algorithm. So go ahead and share this, bring some people on. We're going to, dive into this. So the gender energy, masculine, androgynous, and feminine, and they can take on different positions. Now, it's the same thing goes along with the other gender energy. So when we talk about androgynous energy, androgynous energy is simply put is the combination of both the masculine and the feminine. Okay. All right. And so the androgynous energy can take on a dominant position. It can also take on a neutral position. And also can take on a submissive position. Same thing with feminine. A lot of times, current orientation, we think the feminine is supposed to be 100% submissive. That's not true. The feminine can also be dominant. The feminine also can be neutral, and the feminine also can be submissive. And so when we start to look at this dynamic, they play inside each other in the interplay inside relationships, whether we are aware of it or not. It's kind of similar like the radio waves. We know they exist because we're listening to radio. We know we have technology that's proven that, even though we don't see it. It's the same thing in relationships. These energies are going on. And so with the living soul numerology system, what it does is it uses numerical numbers and takes the energy and help us to be able to understand and see it conceptually so that we can utilize it for our well-being and for guidance and understanding. Okay. So when we start to look into this, so I mentioned that Steph Curry's numbers is 3587. So the 3 is an androgynous submissive. Remember, I said that they can take on different positions. His 5 is an androgynous neutral. His 8 is a masculine submissive. And his 7 is a masculine dominant. Ayesha, she shares in the 3 with Steph as well. That's an androgynous submissive. She shares in the 5. As you can see, there's some connections right there in her attraction. So the 5 is an androgynous neutral. The 9 is a masculine neutral, and the 8 is the masculine submissive. So when we begin to put this together, so Steph's he operates 50% from the masculine energy and 50% from the androgynous energy. Ayesha, the exact same thing. She operates 50% in the masculine energy and 50% from the androgynous energy. As you can see, it's kind of setting the tone right here. All right. And so then we look at the positions that the energy takes. Now, what's interesting, 25% Steph will come from a dominant space, 25% Steph will operate from a neutral space, but 50% Steph will come from a submissive position. And a lot of times, so a lot of brothers that's chiming in and everybody, and most in current, when we think about relationships, we say the men are supposed to be what? Dominant. But that's not necessarily always true. And as we're seeing in percent, Steph really takes on, he's more inclined to take on a submissive position inside a relationship. So Steph exercises his power dynamics from a submissive space. And so when we talk about power dynamics, some people will just quickly think that dominant means it's supreme. No, all 3 positions exercise its power in its own unique way. Steph in the power dynamics will operate from a submissive position. Now, interesting, Ayesha doesn't have a dominant position score. 50% she comes from the neutral space, and 50% she comes from the submissive space. And so what we can see right there is that both of them have a strong tendency to be in submission. I want y'all to footnote that in terms of the relationship as we kind of get into this. Okay. So appreciate, hey, y'all let me know what city y'all coming from. I want to make sure I give y'all a shout out. Okay. And so what we see here is that the inclination for Steph and Ayesha is that interesting when we talk about the overarching energy that governs them, they're really governed by a masculine submissive and an androgynous submissive energy. They operate in that. Okay. Now I want to introduce some of you know I've written a book and it's called Relationship Battery and it breaks down the energetics and relationships. So if you're interested for more insight, I encourage you to go on my Patreon. Just Google Patreon Living Soul and then go into my shop and scroll and find the Relationship Battery. It has a lot of insight that breaks a lot of stuff down. Now, when we talk about the battery, I want you to think about a battery. All relationships have a battery. And so, the battery is charging correctly, everything is flowing, everything's good. If the battery's being overcharged, it's going to be issues. If it's not enough charge going through the battery, there's going to be issues. And so what we do, we capture what's going on inside the relationships. So there's a social sexual battery that exists inside all relationships, right? And so when we talk about the battery, what is indicating is that opposites create charge. Opposites create charge. Like someone was mentioned about physics, and this is where physics come into play. Opposites create charge. Too much sameness, um, and with not enough balance, will lead to a repulsion, a pushing away of each other, right? Or stagnation. There's no movement, or burnout. Too much of the same thing can actually just burn you out or begin to just create a malfunction. Okay. And so we all have been witnessing on the podcast streets, been questioning Ayesha, like, what is going on? And this is not the first time she expressed, a couple of years ago, we went to the Red Table Talk. And so a lot of people, different sides of arguments, women been kind of breaking down their position that women feel like that in relationships. And then men are kind of, on one side, you got people who's actually being mature about it and seeing it from all different sides and so forth. What I want to do is just speak to the energetics and speak to what we're kind of witnessing and seeing that's obvious, and some things that might be a little subtle. So again, when we put all their numbers together, Aisha and Steph, they operate up under a masculine submissive and androgynous submissive type of energy dynamic. Now, we see that they have strong submissiveness. So in power dynamic, there's some sameness there, which means it gives you, insight that the polarity factor is something we got to question a footnote. Okay. Now, so when we talk about the polarity factor, we're talking about the opposite being able to create charge. Okay. And so in their dynamic, Steph and Aisha, was interesting, neither one of them have a feminine score. So they don't, in a relationship, they're less likely to visit, quote unquote, the feminine aspect. So they also something to footnote. So we know Aisha is a woman. She is feminine. Now we talk about biology. She's feminine, right? So we know right there that they both don't have individually, and then collectively they don't generate a feminine score. So that gives us some insight that this is probably where some of their nemesis in a relationship will probably just slip in because of the absent, because of the gap. And we know that when there's a gap, we got to kind of fill it with something. Now, the good thing in their relationship dynamic, because they have a good presence of androgynous energy, it can make up for the lack of feminine energy. So they do have this level of adaptability inside their relationship. Okay. So, but it was like, well, what's the friction? Why, Aisha, like, why is it like she's not upset? Why is she not, satisfied? I think if we be objective and look at what she's been saying and watch the whole thing, we kind of can see some things that hopefully when I break down today, kind of help point and help you see it when you go back and watch what the interview, what she was expressing in fairness to her. Now, again, they operate this way. They don't have feminine energy in a relationship dynamic. So now I talk about the battery dynamic, okay? And so, for example, so the battery dynamic consists of several different scenarios. I won't list them all tonight. I'll just listen what's pertaining to them. But for example, remember I mentioned about the battery, too much sameness can lead to what? Repulsion, pushing each other away, stagnation, or burnout. So if they have a score with too much masculine energy, like masculine to masculine, we're going to talk about there. That's a weak polarity, okay? Because there's a weak charge there. If we're talking about feminine to feminine, that's a weak polarity as well because that's sameness. If we're talking about androgynous to androgynous, that's a weaker polarity. Got a little bit of a signal because androgynous energy has a little bit of adaptability in it, but it's still a very weak charge. So now we switch from there. That's kind of like that non-favorable polarity charging. Then we go to the other side that's more favorable. So we talk about the masculine to feminine, high charge. The opposites, we got that kind of going on. Now, I'm speaking about the polarity tonight, but especially inside the living soul numerology system, there are other measurements we look at to understand the compatibility inside people's relationships. But because the polarity jumps out and because looking at the gender energy position, I see a lot of sameness, it's just really cool to start this particular dialogue on this, and I'll do a part two. to understand the basis of their energetic framework. Okay. So again, note inside the energetic framework, they operate up under a masculine submissive and androgynous submissive type of energetic dynamic. Okay. Now, when we look at the battery dynamics, I just got done talking about the polarity factor, masculine, masculine, feminine, feminine, androgynous, androgynous. Those are weak polarities. Now we talk about masculine, feminine, strong polarities. We talk about androgynous masculine, a good moderate, polarity. You still get a signal going on. And then we talk about androgynous feminine, you get a signal going on. And so when we look at the polarity factor, when we combine and we look at the score of Ayesha and Steph, they actually come out to be at a negative 21% polarity. Okay. And so what does that translate as? Well, what it begins to help us understand, we understand the battery dynamic, they have a good combination of masculine and androgynous energy. So that's good. But then they also score very high with the masculine, masculine. So they got a lot of masculine energy that's circulating that rolls over into their polarity aspect of the relationship dynamic. So when you got masculine, masculine, you got excessive dominance. Even though they have submissive position, we know there's aspect to masculine energy when it's dominance. It wants to lead, it wants to direct, right? And so I think some people was criticizing or questioning Ayesha of jealousy or it seemed like she's trying to compete with Steph. Well, yeah, because they have a lot of masculine energy inside their relationship dynamic. And so the polarity factor is it will come across or will prompt each Steph and her or her. But right now we hear Ayesha verbalizing it more. So we see this aspect of competitiveness. Well, it makes sense when we look at the energy dynamic of the battery. The battery aspect concludes and reveals that. And that's captured inside my book if y'all want reference to that, the relationship battery. Okay. And so also, so the effect on the battery is masculine, masculine, is an overcharging. So there's too much energy, going on, all right, with them. So there's a partner relationship where you have that, okay? And so that means what? Power struggles. So there might be certain areas of life, or different aspects. There's just some power struggle there, okay? Now, how's that look in the relationship dynamic? What begins to happen is you see competitiveness, okay? You see, this is a part I want to bring out big, emotional disconnection. And so one of the things that in a very roundabout way that Ayesha was bringing out is there is an emotional disconnection per se. And we compare it to maybe other type of relationship setups, they might have more of emotional connection. Steph and Ayesha, I don't mean that Steph is hard or anything like that. We're just talking about the energy that they favor in their dynamic. And so looking at their scores, looking at what the diagnostics is, we are seeing from the polarity score that there is, because there's a lot of masculine to masculine combination going on and the overcharges happen in a relationship, it's bringing about a sense of competitiveness, it's bringing a sense of tension, of course, and it can bring out a sense of emotional disconnection. And I want to kind of zero in on that, okay? Now, the other part of the favorable polarity they do have good that's going on is the masculine androgynous combination. And so that's a moderate charge. It's a balanced energy. So Ayesha and Steph really thrives on the balancing and the harmonization factor themselves. So they both have this aspect where they can really adapt to different things. All right. The problem is we got too much androgynous energy is quick to get into a stagnant state because the androgynous energy really doesn't push the envelope anywhere, the direction. When we talk about energy, we talk about motion. Where is it going? So androgynous energy is going in the best direction where the path of the energy is going. Sometimes you need energy to what? Initiate a direction, right? And so they both have that masculine part, so that's good. But they also have a lot of androgynous combination. So there's a part where they can kind of just fall in this thing where they're just holding space for each other. We hear that term all the time, holding space, holding space. But what happens when you're just holding space and you're just holding space and you're just holding space and you're just holding space? You're not able to go anywhere. And so they have that partner relationship too, where there's a sense of emotional stagnation that can come into play. And if that emotional stagnation sits long enough, they can bring, like I say, like an emotional dehydration. They're not able to fuel or add some, water to their emotion that they need. So they, in their dynamic, they love each other. They have this attraction that's very apparent. There's a lot of sameness, but there is this slowly mimesis that shows up in the emotional disconnection area that shows up as emotional dehydration. So they both just have to take a little more effort to make sure that they're mindful, to make sure they're hydrating each other emotionally. And we heard Aisha express some things. And I mean, Steph, man, he's hooping. He's busy. He's not. So their social dynamic of being, present at certain times is probably not common like a lot of us in our personal lives. And so that adds energetically, they already have a weak emotional position and a weak emotional score. And then on top of their actual interaction, we're not doing things that kind of stimulate or refresh the emotional dynamic of them, it will bring some of this to the forefront in a relationship. And so you're seeing that. Now, with their androgynous energy, help them become flexible and try to address. So the good thing is they do have a good significant amount of that. Okay. And so um, when you have the masculine and androgynous combination, when you talk about the battery dynamic, what that points to is that there's a lot of role shifting. So there's a strong aspect in Ayesha and Steph's dynamic. When I think, looking at Steph's demeanor, he probably does that effortlessly. Well, it makes sense. He has that androgynous presence, just like Ayesha does, where they take on different roles. So in a lot of cases, they might not look traditional in the traditional relationship structures that a lot of us have been engineered into or been encouraged. Okay. They will do a lot of role shifting. So I think Aisha be kind of verbalized in the last couple of years. There's something obviously within inside her is kind of a cry to shift some roles and some things because of the her own sense of importance or things she wants to set out and do in her life and so forth. Instead of being just isolated inside a particular role that she's not feeling any emotional she's not getting the emotional hydration from it. And so I think a lot of people, I saw men on the men's side get offended by what she was saying. But I just look at it as, she's dealing with a relational, emotional dehydration. And so now when I mention that, inside the living soul numerology system, we also come from the 5 elements. And so when we look at the earth, wood, water, metal, air, and fire in their scenario, both Steph and Ayesha scores very low in the water. We know the water in this system refers to the feminine. They have no feminine score. They have a weak water score. Okay, that's actually the lowest for both of them. They share in that. So that again points to what? Emotional dehydration. Okay. And so they have to take effort and to understand that this is an Achilles heel in their relationship, especially since they have put in time in. So back after 7 or 9 years in a relationship, it energetically begins to take on a different form. Now, inside the living soul neurology system, the 9 means to what? End a cycle, to rebirth or to kill. So Ayesha being 36 as a woman, she's actually transitioned into a different phase of femininity. So her bioenergetics is also has switched. So she is moving more into the earth energy that's pulling at her, which is challenging her right now to give up the superficiality view of life, to really move and graduate from the aesthetic appeal as a woman and to get more into the inward appeal as a woman. And so that's the transition. Okay. And we know that she kind of came up for a certain very boxed in type of rearing in her background. So it makes sense. So now when she's expressing like, well, I want attention, masculine attention. Well, she said it a couple of years ago. She's still stuck in, she's not understanding the graduation of where she is from the emotional and sensual aspect and need of herself. She's being pulled to understand that the attention you desire is going to come from the attention that you give your inner self as a woman. And then from that, that will begin to radiate and to exude itself and begin to have its own attraction, own power. So Aisha's in this transition to learn a deeper aspect of her feminine power and how to exercise that. Now, keep in mind, that's going to be a challenge for her. Why is that? Why do you say that, Satori? Because she doesn't have a feminist score in her personal soul profile. So, this aspect of her femininity that she is desiring, she's finding a struggle. She's finding that struggle, and she's in the midst of a major phase change. What she actually has, she crossed over into a bioenergetic phase in her femininity. And men go through the exact same thing too in our variation. Okay. And so you see her verbalizing this and and just so you get it. Now, when we talk about the battery factor, here's something real simple to note. Too much togetherness. If you're together all the time, it breeds what? Familiarity. Over familiarity. When you have over, it reduces mystery, it reduces desire, and it reduces attraction. And then when you have reduced polarity, as I mentioned it, that can translate as low sexual energy, or it can start to bring in low sexual energy and then flat social interaction. And so when you look at their score, remember I said 50% Steph in the masculine, 50% in the androgynous. Ayesha, the exact same thing. And then they both score the same in the submissive position. Steph is in 25% in the neutral, and Ayesha's in the 50% neutral. They have a lot of sameness inside their combination together. And so what that shows is that there's a lot of over familiarity in their dynamic energetically. So there's a mystery that obviously that Ayesha desires to have. And Steph probably too, but we just hearing from Ayesha what she's been expressing. So I'm just going off of that. But it's showing energetically, right? Just go watch the previous things in the past and watch this now. I'm just giving the energetic interpretation of what we're seeing. Okay. And so there is over familiarity energetically. When I look at their numbers, there is a lot of sameness, even on the soul elements. The element part is identical. They have a lot of identity. So, what does that mean for them? Steph and Ayesha are what we consider a direct reflection. All relations are a reflection of us, but Steph and Ayesha has this full congruence of reflection of each other. And so we in the relationship pentagon is one of the 5 points that we look at in relationships and look at the vibrancy and the healthy and the functional relationship. We look at the mirroring effect. Aisha and Steph that's why that's why they have an attraction. They have a strong direct mirror. They see themselves in each other. Now, and so that's their strength. Their strength is being able to recognize I see you and you see me inside each other. Into me, I see you. That's intimacy. So Steph and Aisha, um, by looking at their numbers, do have a strong intimacy because of the joint sight that they have in each other and the aspect of understanding, right? So, but we're now just seeing some small little nemesis that slip into the crevice because they put some time in the relationship together. And so now it's taking its different cycles and they switch, a life cycle into another one. So they have completed basically one full life cycle together. and they switch to another one. And so sometimes the switch over, like we switch seasons, we start to see, the transition is not all smoothed out yet. And so the problem is Aisha just verbalizing this transition that's going on energetically. And so we can look at the battery factor is that there's over familiarity. We can align the numbers and look at and line the polarity scores that they get, the line the archetype scores they get, and we really start to see there's an over familiarity that they have. And so the result we see is a reduced mystery. That's why we and think about it, when you go and look at the interview, when it was like, well, that's Steph. She was like, well, yeah, I didn't know all this. That let me realize there's reduced mystery. Steph doesn't hold a mystery to her, okay, because they're just too familiar, right? And that's why sometimes the androgynous energy, if you got strong androgynous energy inside your relationship, you're just holding. You're just in a holding pattern. Y'all are, now good thing is y'all loyal to each other. Y'all committed to each other, don't leave each other, but you're just gonna hold to each other and nothing's really moving. And so there's an aspect where she wanting some mystery and it's starting to maybe affect and come across like, does she like him? Well, it's just they're just in this energetic transition that's making some of these things become out. Okay. And so that's what I want to point out. I will come back because I don't want to, respect time, but I will come back and if y'all got anything to, drop right here in the chat, I'll check you out real fast. But so basically, in a nutshell, what we're witnessing with Aisha and Steph is that there's a lot of sameness in the relationship. So that battery, the polarity factor in a relationship is just rearing its head because it's inviting them to understand the importance of role shifting. So that's their power. And I don't think Steph is resistant to that. That's why I think we haven't really heard too much from Steph making comments because he has this a level of adaptability. And he has this aspect of, he does have a dominant score where he can take lead when he needs to. But they both would rather be supportive of each other. So sometimes they can clash. Too much support. You need direction. And so there's an aspect of that. So even though Aisha is verbalizing she wants her independence and stuff, energetically, she's really a neutral and a submissive person. So she's kind of and that's why when you listen to her talk, you hear some contradictions going on. But that makes sense because of looking at some things in her number. But the biggest thing for them is, right now, what they're dealing with energetically is the emotional dehydration. What draws them and attracts them strongly to each other is that masculine and androgynous energy. That's obvious. Um, they have they share in a good air score, so they have very good communication with each other. So that's very good because that gives you flexibility and resilience inside a relationship and protection. Communication is a protection in the relationship. So they have that. I think I saw something with Steph on X. He made a comment said, "We good over here." So in other words, Steph is confidence in his adaptability in the air that he shares with his significant other, with his wife. They have a good presence of fire. So they have, they got the passion and the metal, but they both show a strong weakness as a combined unit. They're weak their water um, in their water score. Okay, and so that's very low. And so when you look at the other different factors you already mentioned, you kind of can see the underlying theme inside the relationship is emotional dehydration. And so they have to take time and effort to make sure they emotionally hydrate their relationship and then maybe hydrate each other. So hopefully that makes sense. Um, if you want more insight, you can go download my ebook, See Your Lover. You also can download the book I mentioned about the relationship battery. That is on my Patreon. Feel free to join me on Patreon. I go more into different things about relationship energetics that we call relationship numerology, and along with some other different great things. So you go to Patreon, you can just Google, Patreon and put Living Soul, and then you'll see that you can join and you can subscribe to different membership levels to get more access to more information into the audio library and also content that I share there. Okay, and so I appreciate everybody chiming on. Go ahead and share this. We will have this live video will be available for the next couple of days. And then if you want to go back for replay and you don't see it available here on YouTube, it will be available inside my Patreon. And so you can go ahead. Um, oh, hold the book up. So this is See Your Lover. So See Your Lover, and you can grab that. Um, we're kind of out of the physical copies right now, but we got the ebook version of that on Patreon. So go to Patreon Living Soul. When you join, you can join, as a free member. When you join on there, go to the shop and just scroll the shop, and you will See Your Lover book. You will also see Relationship Battery, The Alchemy of Relationships. I highly encourage you to check those because as I continue to visit certain things in the soul to soul conversations, um, discussion that we'll have, talking about relationship numerology, you'll get a lot of reference back and forth there, and it'll help you understand even more when I'm presenting from the numerology point of view. Okay. Let me just check what anybody else got. So we appreciate DMV for showing up with the cities. And so again, so just feel free to share. Thank you in advance for sharing this to others. Hopefully you got something out of this, right? So we'll touch back down again, and I'll revisit the Ayesha and Steph dynamic and pull some other things out that we see from their numbers to get some insight and understanding. And so again, as I close, their relationship is dominated and driven by the masculine submissive. And so I didn't mention this earlier. So communication is a big thing for them. And this observation, I think they have very great communication. So that's great because their relationship dynamic sits upon that very strong. And then also their drug and submissive points to a high level of selflessness. And so their relationship is strengthened and charged by communication and selflessness. And so long as they continue to operate in that, they'll be fine. They'll be fine because that is their power. That's the power source inside their relationship. If Steph starts to try to appeal to Aisha's, I'll get into another. I'll get into another time. But so as I close, their relationship is strengthened and driven and helped, you know, maintain and sustain by good communication and selflessness. That's what's going to keep them thriving and keep them to begin as they shift into a different life phase energetically to help them to adapt and adjust to the new physical, social, and the energetic demands that's going to require them to align with. Okay. So that's what's up. Appreciate everybody. We'll touch back down. Hey, one love.